The dinner had ended an hour ago, her best friend's birthday, and most of the guests had already drifted out into the cool night. But somehow, she was still there, sitting at the kitchen counter, watching the steam rise from a cup of coffee she didn't even want. The house had gone quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Across the counter, Daniel leaned back in his chair, his sleeves rolled up, half a smile playing on his face. Her best friend's husband, 27. Too young to look so calm, she thought. Too confident for someone who should have been clearing dishes instead of staying behind with her. "Are you always this serious?" he asked suddenly. Mara blinked. "Serious?" "Yeah," he said, stirring his coffee with the handle of his spoon. "You look like you're thinking about something that hasn't even happened yet." She laughed quietly, more out of discomfort than amusement. That's accurate. It wasn't that she didn't like him. Daniel was polite, easy to talk to, the kind of man who noticed things without making it awkward. He'd remembered her drink order, helped her carry boxes earlier in the evening. He was attentive in a way that made her uneasy, not because of what he did, but because of what she felt seeing it. She hadn't been looked at like that in a long time, like someone might actually be paying attention. "I didn't mean to keep you," she said, standing up, avoiding his eyes. "It's late. You probably want to stay a little," he interrupted softly. "You said you used to live near the coast, right? I wanted to ask you something about that." His tone was light, but something in it made her hesitate. She sat back down, feeling the stool creak beneath her. The kitchen light was too bright, too exposing. "Sure," she said. "What do you want to know?" He hesitated, looking down at his hands, long fingers restless. "Was it hard to leave?" She frowned. "The coast." He nodded. She thought of the ocean, of mornings with wind in her hair, of her ex-husband's silence that always seemed louder by the water. She didn't answer right away. "Yes," she said finally. "It was hard to leave." Daniel looked up then, and there was something different in his expression, not curiosity, not pity, something she didn't want to name. "Yeah," he murmured. "I figured. You don't talk about it like someone who's moved on." The air tightened between them, invisible but undeniable. The clock ticked again, 1, 2, 3, before she found her voice. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "I know," he said. He didn't look away. And in that small, unbearable silence that followed, Mara realized it wasn't what he said that shocked her. It was the truth hiding underneath it. For days after that night, Mara kept replaying his words, or maybe just the silence that followed them. Daniel had said nothing wrong, technically, but it wasn't the kind of thing a friend's husband should say, not with that quiet certainty, not with the way his eyes held hers a second too long before looking away. She told herself it was nothing. People say strange things late at night. But when she saw him again, 2 days later at the bookstore cafe downtown, she felt that same uneasy stillness ripple through her. He was sitting alone by the window, reading something thick and serious. When he noticed her, he smiled, like he'd been expecting her. "Mara," he said, "didn't think I'd see you here." She laughed lightly, though it came out thinner than she meant. "It's my escape spot. You're stealing my seat. Guess I'll have to buy you coffee as an apology." He said it casually, but the offer hung there, too gentle to ignore, too familiar to accept easily. She hesitated before sitting down. The truth was, she'd known Daniel for almost 3 years. Her best friend, Lila, had married him after a short whirlwind romance, the kind Mara had smiled through but never quite understood. Daniel had always been polite, attentive, a little reserved. He worked in architecture. She taught literature at a community college. Their paths crossed just enough for friendly conversation, never long enough to invite questions. Until recently, Lila had been busy lately, traveling for work, often gone for days. And every time Mara dropped by their house, it was Daniel who opened the door. He always looked a little surprised, like he wasn't sure whether to invite her in or apologize for being there. Now, sitting across from him in the soft cafe light, she noticed small things, the faint shadows under his eyes, the nervous way he drummed his fingers on the table, the way his coffee had already gone cold. "So," she said, trying to sound casual, "how's Lila?" Still buried in that project. He nodded. "She'll be back Friday. Long week ahead." There was a pause, the kind that stretches thin before either person decides to fill it. Then Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her. "You know," he said, voice low, "she's lucky to have you. You're the only person she really listens to." Mara looked down at her hands. The compliment didn't land like it should have. "Don't say that," she murmured. "You make it sound like she doesn't listen to you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe she doesn't." A quiet moment followed, just the hum of the espresso machine and the faint patter of rain against the glass. Mara wanted to stand, to leave, to say something that would close the distance growing between them. But before she could, Daniel asked softly, almost as if it hurt to say it, "Mara, do you ever feel like you ended up in the wrong life?" She froze, and just like that, the question she'd avoided for years was suddenly sitting right in front of her. For the next week, Mara tried to keep her distance. She told herself it was for the best. Fewer visits, fewer coffee breaks, fewer reasons to think about the question Daniel had asked. But life has a way of weaving people back together when they're trying not to meet. Lila called one evening, her voice rushed and distracted. "Mara, could you do me a favor? Daniel's been under the weather. I'm stuck 2 cities away for this conference, and I don't want him alone all weekend. Could you just check in on him?" Mara hesitated. She wanted to say no, but the sound of Lila's trust, her easy assumption that nothing was complicated, made refusal feel impossible. "Of course," Mara said quietly. "I'll stop by tomorrow." When she arrived the next afternoon, the house felt different, still and dim, like it hadn't been open to the world all day. Daniel answered the door in a sweatshirt, his hair unkempt, a light cough catching his voice. "You didn't have to come," he said, half smiling. "I'm fine. You don't sound fine." She set a paper bag on the counter, soup, ginger tea, a loaf of bread. Things people bring when they don't know what else to do. He thanked her quietly. They moved around each other in the kitchen, awkwardly polite, like strangers rehearsing familiarity. "You shouldn't let the house get this cold," she said, rubbing her hands together. "Yeah," he murmured. "Lila usually turns the heat up. I didn't notice." Something in his tone made her pause. Not bitterness, just absence. A hollow kind of quiet that spoke louder than anything else. They sat at the table, the same one from the dinner party. The clock ticked again, steady as breath. "Mara," Daniel said finally, "I shouldn't have said that thing at the cafe. About being in the wrong life." She looked at him. "You were just being honest. Maybe too honest." The air between them held everything unsaid. The distance between regret and understanding, between what should stay silent and what already wasn't. Before she could reply, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen, then turned it face down. "Lila?" she asked. He nodded. "She's fine. She just doesn't really talk anymore." Mara leaned back, her chest tightening with something that felt like sympathy or guilt or both. "Marriage gets quiet sometimes," she said. "People grow differently." Daniel looked up at her then, really looked. "Do you think that's all it is?" Mara didn't answer. In the hallway, the heat clicked on at last, the sound filling the silence they didn't know how to break. And as she watched him stare down at his untouched soup, she realized the real danger wasn't what he said. It was how much she wanted to understand why he said it. By the next time they saw each other, neither of them pretended it was by accident. It was a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind that made the sky feel heavy and close. Mara had gone to the small art gallery downtown, one of those quiet places that smelled faintly of dust and rain, to clear her head. She'd been grading essays all week, trying not to think about Daniel's words, his tone, or the way his eyes had lingered that last day. And then, halfway through the photography exhibit, she heard his voice. "Mara." She turned, startled. He looked different, sharper somehow, tired but more present. He was holding a folded umbrella and wearing that same half-smile she'd come to recognize as uncertainty disguised as calm. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, though part of her already knew he'd started coming to the same places she did. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer to a black-and-white photo on the wall. "You always talk about these kinds of places in your classes. I thought I'd see what it was about." She nodded, her pulse quickening. And he tilted his head, studying the photo. An empty beach, one set of footprints vanishing into the tide. "It feels like someone left before they meant to." She didn't look at him, but she felt the words land somewhere deep, somewhere she tried to keep quiet. They walked together for a while, not talking much. The silence wasn't comfortable anymore, but it wasn't cold either. It carried weight, memory, and something that felt dangerously like understanding. When they reached the last room, Daniel stopped beside her. "Lila's been gone all week again," he said quietly. "She texted me once." Mara swallowed. "She's busy. You know how her work is." He nodded. "Yeah, but it's more than that." He hesitated, glancing at her. "She talks about you, you know. Says she misses how close you two used to be." Mara exhaled slowly, unsure what to do with that. "That's kind of her." "Is it?" His voice softened, almost breaking. "Because when she talks about you, she sounds lighter. Like she's talking about someone who reminds her what real feels like." The words hung in the still air of the gallery. Mara's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. She wanted to tell him to stop, to say this was wrong, that he was confusing kindness for connection. But her throat refused to move. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but steady. Daniel took a breath, then said, "You make it hard to forget what's missing." Mara turned toward him, eyes wide. Not in anger, but in something close to fear. The lights flickered once, briefly. And in that flicker, she saw it clearly. The moment before everything they'd been avoiding finally came too close to name. The storm that started that evening didn't end for 2 days. Thunder, steady and distant, became the kind of sound that stayed beneath everything. Dinner conversations, the hum of streetlights, even her thoughts. Mara tried to go on with her week. She taught her classes, smiled when needed, kept her voice even. But every time she passed a mirror, she caught a glimpse of something unfamiliar. A woman half-haunted by what she hadn't said. On Friday afternoon, she got a message from Lila. "Back in town. Let's catch up tomorrow. I miss you." It should have been comforting. Instead, Mara's stomach knotted. She typed of course and hit send before she could overthink it. But that night, just after 11, her phone buzzed again, a number she recognized before she even looked. Daniel. She stared at the screen, waiting for it to stop ringing. It didn't. Finally, she answered. "It's late. I know." His voice was quiet, low. "But I need to ask you something before tomorrow." Her chest tightened. "Daniel, please," he said, cutting her off. "Just hear me out." There was something in his tone she hadn't heard before. Not calm, not careful. Desperate, maybe. "I found something," he said, in Lila's laptop. An email thread. "I shouldn't have looked, I know, but..." He stopped, breathing unevenly. "It was about me. And you." Mara froze. "What are you talking about?" She wrote to someone, her sister, I think. She said she's been worried about you and me, that she thinks I've been distant, that maybe it's because of how much I talk about you. Mara's mouth went dry. "She what?" She said she's scared she's losing both of us. The room around Mara felt suddenly too small. "Daniel, you need to delete that email and pretend you never saw it. Do you understand?" He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "She's right, though." Her voice shook. "Don't. I'm not saying don't." Silence filled the line. She could hear rain hitting his windows on the other end, the sound merging with her own heartbeat. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I thought I could control it. I can't." Mara pressed her hand against her forehead, eyes closed. "Daniel, this isn't something we can fix with words." "I know. And tomorrow," she whispered, "you'll see her. You'll smile, and she'll hug you, and we'll all pretend nothing's changed." He didn't argue. But when she hung up, her hands were trembling. The next morning came too quickly. Lila arrived at the cafe wearing that same bright laugh Mara had always admired, the one that filled every space without trying. They hugged, sat, talked. But halfway through, Lila looked at her with a strange kind of softness. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Daniel, too. Did something happen while I was gone?" Mara blinked, her throat dry. Across the room, through the glass, Daniel was standing outside, rain-soaked, still, his eyes on her like he'd been waiting for an answer she hadn't decided to give. Mara didn't remember standing up, but suddenly she was outside, the cold rain finding every uncovered inch of her. Daniel was still there, under the awning across the street, motionless. The world around them blurred into gray. Cars passing, people rushing by, and yet Everything felt painfully still. "Why are you here?" she asked when she reached him, breath uneven. "I didn't plan it," he said. "I just needed to see you. After last night." "You shouldn't have come," she said, shaking her head. "Lila's inside. She saw you." He looked down, raindrops clinging to his eyelashes. "I know. Maybe that's the point." She froze. "What does that mean?" He took a small step closer, his voice barely above the rain. "I can't keep pretending. I've tried to forget what I said, what I feel, but it doesn't go away. And she knows it. She's known for a while." Mara's stomach twisted. "Daniel, stop. You're making this worse." "Worse than what?" he said, his tone breaking. "Worse than pretending every time I talk to her that I'm not thinking about you." The words landed like thunder. She wanted to move, to walk away, to say something that would undo all of this, but her body betrayed her. "You think this is love?" she whispered. "It's not. It's confusion. It's loneliness dressed up as something else." He exhaled, defeated. "Maybe, but it still feels real." For a long moment, the sound of rain filled the silence between them. People hurried past, umbrellas tilted, voices distant. "Do you remember what you asked me that night?" she said finally. "If I felt like I ended up in the wrong life." He nodded. "I don't," she said softly. "Not anymore." Something flickered across his face. Pain, understanding, maybe both. He looked away, then back at her, eyes glassy. "So that's it. It has to be," she said. Just then, the cafe door opened. Lila stepped out, her coat half-buttoned, scanning the street. When she spotted them, her expression shifted, confusion, then realization. "Mara." The sound of her name hit like a gust of wind. Mara turned, her throat dry. "Lila," but before she could explain, Daniel spoke. "She didn't do anything wrong," he said quickly. "It's me. It's all me." Lila stared between them, at her husband, at her oldest friend, and for one endless second, none of them moved. Then, without a word, Lila turned and walked away, leaving both of them standing in the rain. Daniel looked at Mara one last time. "Maybe it's better this way," he said quietly. And as he disappeared into the downpour, Mara realized the truth she'd been avoiding all along, that the hardest part wasn't losing him or Lila. It was finally having to live with the part of herself that had wanted it to happen. A month passed before Mara saw either of them again. The town had shifted into early spring, gray giving way to green, rain replaced by soft wind. She still taught her classes, still walked the same routes home, but everything felt different, like someone had quietly rearranged the furniture of her life. She hadn't heard from Daniel or Lila since that day outside the cafe. Lila's number stayed in her phone, uncalled. Every so often, Mara typed a message. "I'm sorry, I miss you, can we talk?" And then erased it before sending. Some silences, she realized, were too fragile to break. Then one afternoon, she stopped by the gallery again, the same one where the storm had started everything. The air smelled of fresh paint and new exhibits. On the far wall hung a photograph she hadn't seen before, a shoreline at dusk, the tide pulling away, leaving only faint footprints that disappeared into the water. She stood there for a long while, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind her. She turned. Lila stood a few feet away, arms crossed loosely, her smile tired but real. "Lila, I wasn't sure you'd come here again," Lila said. "I thought maybe you'd moved on." Mara hesitated. "I tried." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't hurt as much as it used to. "I didn't come to argue," Lila said finally. "I just wanted you to know we're separating. It's not because of what happened. It's been coming for a long time." Mara's chest tightened. "I am sorry." "Don't be," Lila said softly. "Sometimes things fall apart quietly. Sometimes they're already gone before you notice." Mara nodded, eyes lowering. "And Daniel, he's moving, somewhere near the coast. Said he needed to start over." The words settled between them like the sound of waves far away. Inevitable, distant calm. Lila gave a small, bittersweet smile. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Mara managed one in return. "You too." After she left, Mara stayed by the photograph, watching the fading light reflect off its frame. For the first time in months, her hands felt steady. Maybe this was what closure looked like. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but standing still long enough to see what remained. She stepped outside into the evening air. The sky above the harbor was streaked with color, soft pinks, muted gold. The same horizon she'd once left behind, now waiting quietly ahead. Mara breathed in the salt air and whispered, almost to herself, maybe we were never in the wrong life, just the wrong moment. And for the first time, the thought didn't ache. It simply felt true.